Hello, welcome back to the final part of making the wormhole shader. Actually, I made a mistake in my last video to say we should delete our entire progress. Actually, we could have left some nodes. If you did delete them, just add them to follow along again. We can actually keep our color ramp node since we will use it for our final shader. But we will disconnect it from our noise node. We can also disconnect the bottom mapping node and duplicate it. Make sure to also connect the duplicated mapping node to our texture coordinate node like the other mapping node. Then we can add a color mix node with which we will mix two Voronoi texture nodes together with. So we can duplicate the Voronoi node which was already there and connect both of them to our color mix node. You can already see something happening in our viewport. Now we can connect that unconnected noise texture node with the vector of our bottom Voronoi node. Now you can see that our noise texture made the big black parts break up into much smaller parts in our viewport render. When decreasing the scale value of our noise texture node, you can see that the black parts become bigger again. Now the last texture node we will add is a Musgrave texture node. This node will enable us to make our shader look more cooler. After adding, we can connect the VAG socket of our Musgrave node to the scale socket of our top Voronoi node. Then we can also connect the middle mapping node to our top Voronoi node. So vector to vector here. The bottom mapping node you can connect to the vector of the noise texture node. This is needed since the mapping nodes will affect our texture nodes in terms of scaling, rotation and animation. The node setup that you see now is basically the entire node tree that we need. Now we just need to adjust the values and settings of our nodes to get to our final result. The first thing we change is the setting of our color mix node. We can set it to burn instead of mix. Then we can change the scale value of our bottom Voronoi node to around 16. We can also connect the VAG socket of our Musgrave node to the detail socket of our noise node below. After that we can change the value of our Musgrave scale to around 50,000. Yes, you heard that right, 50,000. I will explain later why this high value is needed. Then we can start changing some other values of the Musgrave texture node, such as detail to 16, dimension to around 40, offset and gain to 200. After changing these values you still cannot see much change. You will after we start working on our color ramp node. One other thing we need to do is to increase the scale value for the y-axis on our middle mapping node in order to stretch the texture to the length of the wormhole. A value of around 100 to start with is enough. We can always adjust this later in the final tweaking phase. Now we can start working on our color ramp node. The first thing we can do is to reverse the handle order with the double arrow on both side button, after which you can see an immediate change. I advise you to add and move the color ramp handles as I do. This way your shader will be as awesome as mine. Telling you at what exact location each handle should be is too tedious, so just follow my lead. So now you see that I have 5 handles in total. Always make sure the most left handle is black. This is needed to have those black areas.